My life in Seabrook was a carefully curated still life. It was a small salt-weathered town clinging to the coast, just far enough from the city to feel like a sanctuary. My days had a rhythm to them, a gentle metronome set by the crash and pull of the waves. I lived in a small cottage with a porch that overlooked the water, painted a fading blue that matched the summer sky. Mornings began with the bitter steam of black coffee and the soft crinkle of the newspaper. Evenings were for long walks on the beach, the cool sand a familiar kiss against my soles, the cries of the gulls a lonely, comforting song. I was a graphic designer, and my work was a quiet stream of logos and layouts for local shops. I had friends, good ones, who I met for wine on Fridays at the Salty Mermaid. It was a safe life, a calm life. It was a life built on the bedrock of recovery from earlier, noisier hurts, and I cherished its quiet predictability. I had convinced myself that this was enough, that the faint ache of loneliness was a small price to pay for such peace. Then I met Leo. It was a Tuesday, and the rain was sheeting down, blurring the world outside the café window into a watercolor wash of grays and greens. I was tucked into my usual corner, sketching idly on my tablet, when he asked if he could share my table. The place was packed, a haven from the sudden downpour. He had a kind face, the sort that seemed to hold its own light. His eyes were a warm, clear brown, and when he smiled, a small apologetic crease appeared at the corner of his mouth. He was reading a book of poetry, its spine well cracked. We talked, or rather, he asked questions, the good kind, the ones that aren't just waiting for your turn to speak. He listened like my words were a language he'd been trying to learn his whole life. The rain stopped, the café emptied. We were still talking. He felt like a revelation, a sudden warm shaft of sunlight breaking through my carefully controlled cloud cover. He was gentle, his laughter was quiet, and his hands, when he gestured, were capable and calm. He felt different. He felt real. The reveal came weeks later, after a handful of perfect, stolen afternoons. We were in his car, parked at the lookout point over the harbor. The sun was setting the water on fire. He was holding my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. His voice, when he spoke, was thick with a grief that seemed to belong to someone else. "There's something I have to tell you," he said. The words that followed landed not with a scream, but with the sickening, silent crush of a building collapsing. A wife, 2 children, a life in the city, a 40-minute drive that suddenly felt like a chasm across which my entire understanding of him vaporized. The kind face, the gentle hands, they were not wholly mine, they were on loan. The poetry he read was bookmarked by the domestic rhythm of a family I would never know. I felt the world tilt, the colors of the sunset bleeding into something garish and wrong. I said nothing. I just pulled my hand away and got out of the car. The salt air, usually so cleansing, tasted of betrayal. I ended it. Or I tried to. For 3 days I clung to my anger, my righteousness. I walked the beach until my legs ached, screaming at the gulls about respect and boundaries and self-worth. But the silence of my cottage became a vacuum, and the memory of his light, the feeling of being truly seen by him, was a potent lure. He came back. He stood on my porch in the drizzle, his shoulders slumped. His explanation a tangled knot of regret and longing. He was lonely. He was trapped. He had never felt a connection like ours. The classic cliché dirge of the unhappy man. I should have slammed the door. I should have thrown rocks. But I let him in. And so began the secret life. Our world shrank to the dimensions of my cottage and the deserted winter beaches. Our time was measured in hours, not days. He was warmth and attention, a drug I craved. The moments were intensely private, intensely cinematic. Morning light on the rumpled sheets, the smell of rain on his jacket as he hung it by my door, the whispered conversations that felt like the most profound intimacy I'd ever known. But the warmth was always followed by the cold dread of his leaving. The click of the door closing behind him was the sound of my world shrinking another inch. The guilt was a constant low hum, a second pulse beneath my skin. I stopped seeing my friends. Their happy, uncomplicated lives felt like an accusation. My work suffered. I was always waiting, my phone a live wire in my hand, my happiness contingent on the ping of a text message that placed him briefly back in my orbit. I was a satellite to his distant, hidden sun. The intervention wasn't dramatic. It was my friend Clara on my porch one Tuesday, refusing to be turned away. She held a bottle of wine and a determined look. She didn't yell. She just looked at me, at the unwashed dishes in my sink, at the hollows under my eyes, and said, "Who are you waiting for, my love? And is he worth the ghost you're becoming?" Her words didn't spark anger. They sparked a terrible, clear-eyed clarity. I looked at my reflection in the dark window pane and saw a woman hunched over, making a secret of her own life. I saw a woman who had traded her peaceful, whole self for scraps of affection from a man who would always leave before dinner. The love I thought was so profound was just a cage with pretty bars. I was his ruin, but only because I had handed him the tools and shown him where to build. I ended it the next time he came over. There was no screaming, no grand scene. I was preternaturally calm. I told him he had to go back to his life and really live in it, or leave it, but that he could no longer live in mine. I told him that my love for myself had to be bigger than my love for him. My voice didn't even shake. The dignity was in the quiet finality. He cried, he pleaded, but I had already left. I held the door open for him, and when it closed, I didn't slide down it and sob. I locked it. Then I cleaned the entire cottage, scrubbing away the scent of him, the memory of our stolen afternoons. I opened all the windows. The sea air rushed in, cold and clean and unforgiving. Healing was not a straight line. It was a slow, deliberate reconstruction. I called Clara. I called my other friends. I said I was back. They asked no questions. They just opened the circle and let me in. I went back to the salty mermaid and laughed, a real laugh that felt strange in my throat. I picked up my camera again and walked the beach, not to brood but to photograph the way the winter light hit the waves. I joined a writing class at the community center, and I started to put my story down on paper, not as a tragedy but as a lesson. The words were painful at first, like stretching a muscle long unused. But with each sentence I took a piece of my story back. I learned the topography of my own company again and found it to be rich and sufficient. Months later, at that same writing class, a man named David read a short piece about building a bookshelf for his niece. His story was not flashy or poetic. It was about the patience of measuring twice, the satisfaction of a level shelf, the joy in a child's face. He read with a quiet certainty that was devoid of performance. Afterwards, we talked about wood grain and the importance of a good hammer. He asked if I wanted to get a coffee sometime, his eyes meeting mine with a direct, uncomplicated kindness. There was no hidden storm in his gaze, no tragic backstory lurking in his smile, just a calm, open steadiness. I said yes. It is a different kind of yes now. With David, there is no cinematic frenzy, no desperate secret heat. There is the solid comfort of a Saturday morning spent reading side by side in comfortable silence. There is the easy generosity of him bringing me a coffee because he remembered I take it black. He talks about his family with open affection. His life is not a partitioned secret. It is a house with all the windows open, and I am welcome to walk through the front door. It is not a ruin. It is a steady, gentle construction. I know now that love shouldn't be a secret you keep from yourself. It shouldn't demand the shrinking of your world. It should be the thing that makes it expand. I walk the same beach, but the ache is gone, replaced by a profound and hard-won calm. The love that ruined me taught me how to choose the love that would not. And this time, the light through the window is just light, warm, clear, and entirely my own. If stories like this resonate, subscribe for more.